Good morning. Today is Sunday, April 23rd, 2023. In this week's Torah portion, we have the famous verse, Kedoshim Tihiyu, be holy. Ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem, because I, the Lord, your God, am holy, so you should also be holy. Now, that is a logical reason that the Torah gives us that we should be holy, because in general, we have a principle: our greatest good in life is to imitate God. Just as we find that God is compassionate, we should be compassionate. Just as we find that God is merciful, we should be merciful. Just as we find that God is holy, we should be holy. Okay. But our rabbis in the Midrash say something that is quite strange and difficult to understand on its surface. When the Torah says, God tells us, be holy because I, God, am holy, says the rabbis in the Midrash, you might think that you can be as holy as God. Therefore, God says to us, my holiness is greater than yours. Very strange passage. I mean, did anybody really think, reading that first pasuk, that my holiness was going to equal God's? It would be some miniature, pale imitation. But the rabbis have to tell me, don't think that your holiness is the same as God's holiness. Why do the rabbis have to tell us that? So I want to share something that I learned from Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twerski, of blessed memory. There's another verse in this week's Torah portion, an incredible verse. The Torah says, God says to the Jewish people, Ani Hashem, I am God, Hasholchein itam besoch tumasam. I am God who dwells within you, among you, within you, in the midst of your impurity. An amazing pasuk. An incredible statement of God's unconditional love for us. At every moment, in every situation, it doesn't matter whether we are pure or impure. It doesn't matter whether we're up or down. It doesn't matter our status, our spirituality. None of it matters. God is still Hasholchein itam. God is with us at every moment. Unconditional love, unconditional closeness. Incredible. But Dr. Twerski points out that there is a second implication of this verse, and that is, Ani Hashem Hasholchein itam besoch tumasam. I am God who dwells amongst you, even when you are impure, because I, God, am not affected by your impurity. I, God, am immune to any type of corruption. Even when I, God, mingle among those who are impure, I'm not affected. So Rabbi Twerski says, a person might think, reading this pasuk, and then reading the other pasuk, we should be holy because God is holy. Well, all right. If God can dwell between anyone, among any circumstance, and God is not affected by it, God is immune to any kind of scandal or corruption or negative association, maybe I'm the same way. Maybe if I try my best to be holy, if I try my best to be God, it doesn't matter what surroundings I find myself in. It doesn't matter which company I keep. It doesn't matter how close to the line I may come. I'm immune, just like God is immune. And therefore our rabbis in the Midrash tell us that is a big mistake, my friend. That's the part that's true for God. That God is immune to whatever temptation of corruption or scandal there may be. But we human beings, our holiness, no matter how hard we try, no matter how high we reach, our holiness is not of that type. Our holiness is affected by where we are. Our holiness is affected by the circumstances in which we find ourselves. And we cannot assume that we can remain holy and immune to any kind of scandal or corruption or falling. We want to be holy. We want to be good. But far too often, we fall. We make mistakes. Little mistakes and big mistakes. And sometimes we fall to scandal. I am particularly sensitive when I look at the news to scandals among Orthodox Jews. It hurts me. And I have to tell you, speaking personally, I am even more particularly sensitive to scandals among rabbis. It hurts. It affects me deeply. A number of years ago, there was a terrible, terrible scandal committed by an Orthodox rabbi in another place. This person was someone I knew, and up until that moment, someone that I admired, someone who up until then I considered a mentor. What he did was very, very bad. I'm not going to repeat it. And our rabbinical organization did a lot of soul searching. We instituted new procedures to try to help prevent this from ever happening again. And we brought in experts to help us understand how something like this could happen to someone in our group, Orthodox rabbis. And most importantly, what we could do for ourselves, what I can do for myself to help us from becoming, God forbid, that kind of person, doing such a terrible, terrible thing. It was an agonizing time for me and many rabbis, though it does not compare to the pain and suffering of the victims of what this rabbi did. And it was hard for me and for others. It was gut-wrenching to turn the spotlight on ourselves and have an outside professional evaluate us and point out our weaknesses, point out our vulnerabilities. I learned many things that I had already put into practice, thank God, and I learned other steps that I did put into practice. But here was the most important lesson that I learned. Every single person, without exception, and obviously that includes me, every single one of us is capable of the absolutely worst, most scandalous behavior. And I have to create safeguards to help ensure that I never fall into that. The moment that I assume, well, I would never do that. I'm a moral person. I'm a religious person. There is no way that that could happen to me. Now, no matter how objectively true that might be, the moment that I assume I am uncorruptible, I am invincible, that is the moment when the potential for disaster is born. That's the moment when it's created. Yes, it is true, all humans are fallible. But the first step to being holy, if we want to try to approach this comprehensive approach to life, Kedoshim Tihiyu, be holy, the first step towards trying to realize that is to recognize I could fall in the worst possible way. And I have to protect myself. I have to assume if I don't take steps to protect myself, I could fall. No one is immune to corruption. No one is immune to scandal. And therefore, this warning of our sages, don't think that your holiness, no matter how much of it you achieve, no matter how high you come, no matter how close you are to actually fulfilling Kedoshim Tihiyu, no one should think that your behavior is innate like God's. There's a qualitative difference, not just quantitative, in the difference between God's holiness and our holiness. God's holiness is incorruptible. Our holiness is always vulnerable to failure. And just because you're okay now, it does not mean you will stay okay. Just because I am okay now, and thank God I'm okay now, it does not mean that I will stay okay. So, this applies to every single one of us. I have to apply it to myself. I have to take precautions. I have to create guardrails. I have to maintain transparency. I have to welcome criticism and oversight. I have to do whatever is necessary to take the steps to recognize I could do the most terrible, terrible thing if I'm not careful, if I don't take steps to protect myself and to protect others around me. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan of Radin, known to us as the Chavetz Chaim. He's known to us as the Chavetz Chaim because the many, many works that he published that are classic works in Jewish law and Jewish thought. The one that he is most identified with is a work called Chafetz Chaim, which means who wants life. And it is based on the line in Tehillim, who wants life? What do you do if you want long, happy life? Guard your tongue from speaking evil. The Chavetz Chaim taught, cataloged, analyzed, elucidated the laws of the Lashon Hara, not to speak negative things about another person. And when is it okay, and when is it not okay, and how should you say it, and what should you not say, what should you say, what are you required to say? We've discussed these rules many, many times. And we know him as the Chavetz Chaim because among all of the different magnificent publications, this is the one that he is most closely aligned with, teaching us to be so careful not to say something negative about another person. In his older years, the Chavetz Chaim once said, people think that I have no temptation to speak gossip, to speak Lashon Hara. People think he wrote the Chavetz Chaim. He is the Chavetz Chaim. You think he would ever speak Lashon Hara? He's the one that taught the entire Jewish people about not speaking Lashon Hara. He, of course, doesn't have to worry about it. People think I don't have any temptation. He said, I want you to know, I wrote the book. I devoted my life to teaching this subject. I know the consequences. I know how serious it is. I have just as much, if not more, temptation than you do to speak Lashon Hara. All the time I find myself that I want to speak Lashon Hara. I want to say something negative. I want to gossip. I want to slander. This is Chavetz Chaim speaking about himself. But I take precautions. And he said, Baruch Hashem, thank God, I'm so grateful. I reached an advanced age. I've become hard of hearing. So Baruch Hashem, thank God, I have this automatic precaution against hearing anybody else say negative words about somebody else. Because remember, it's prohibited to speak it. It's prohibited to listen to it. So Baruch Hashem, that's taken care of. I don't have to worry about. But in my earlier years, he says, my temptation to speak and to listen to a juicy piece of gossip, it was just as strong, if not stronger, than yours. But I had a strategy. And the Chavetz Chaim held up his fingers and he said, you know why God created us with fingers? Why do our arms, which are so useful, they come to little points at the end of the fingers? It's amazing. The finger exactly fits into your ear. It's the perfect fit. That's what it's there for. So if you're around someone who starts to say something negative, you use your fingers. I, and every single one of us, needs fingers in our ears, or the equivalent for every other possible misstep and scandal and corruption. Because otherwise, we cannot hope to achieve Kedoshim Tihiyu, to be holy. My friends, have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.